Hello fight fans, welcome back to WhatCulture Combat. As you can tell, I'm in my flat because, well, everyone's working from home to try and get the best content available that we can out to you guys in this current global situation. So yeah, that's why I'm sat here wearing a hat on my couch, and today I thought we'd do something, again, slightly different. We're not going to give you any news updates or anything like that, because let's be honest, there's not an awful lot happening because a lot of the fights have been suspended for the foreseeable future and everything else. So what I thought I'd do is treat you guys to another breaking down the rankings video. As you've probably already seen on the WhatCulture Combat channel, we had a breaking down the rankings video of the heavyweight division, which seemed to go down quite well. It seemed like you guys quite like that. So what we're going to do this time, we're going to break down the uber competitive, in my opinion, the most competitive division in all of the UFC right now, the lightweight division. So without further ado, join me, Gareth Morgan from WhatCulture Combat, as we take a look down, we break down the lightweight rankings. Okay, so straight out the bat, number 10 is one Kevin Lee. Kevin Lee, if you didn't know at this point, he's been a bit of an up and down man in terms of the lightweight division. Up until a couple of days ago, before he got choked out by Charles Oliveira, he was actually ranked number 8, but now he's slipped back down to number 10. He's not quite out of the top 10 rankings altogether, but he's just hanging on for dear life. In that clash that he had with Charles Oliveira, he went into that clash as, in my opinion, he was probably the favourite coming into it. He had all the momentum. He talks a really good game, so obviously he talked up an absolute spin in the lead up to the fight, and everyone fully thought, yeah, he's going to be the man to do the job against Charles Oliveira, but he didn't. He wasn't able to do it. He did get choked out, and then there was a really weird moment where he tried to continue with the fight, even though he just tapped out. It was weird. But going into that fight, he'd beaten the likes of Chiesa, he'd beaten Edson Barboza, but he's only now actually won one of his last 4. So it's quite remarkable that I came into that fight thinking he was going to be the favourite, really, because his record didn't suggest that. He came into this fight thinking, right, if we stay on the feet, it's going to be something quite impressive against Charles Oliveira, who himself has managed to sneak into this top 10 after that fight. But he didn't have enough. He didn't have enough to do it on the day, but he's still in these top 10 rankings at this point. What's next for him? We don't quite know. Is he going to need to take on somebody else in the top 10 to re-establish himself, or is he just going to have to try and beat anybody else below him, just firmly establish himself as a top 10 fighter? We don't know at this stage. And at number 9, we've got Raging Al Iaquinta, who himself is probably one of the toughest SOBs in all of the UFC right now. His record is a solid 14-6-1, so that's 14 wins, 6 losses and 1 draw. He's got 7 KOs, he's got 6 decisions, and he's actually only got 1 first round finish, but it just goes to show he's quite a tough fighter. He tends to keep going. He's lost his last 2 though. He lost to Dan Hooker and Donald Cowboy Cerrone, 2 guys who are ranked above him in these rankings. So again, nothing to be ashamed of, really, losing to top class competitors. But he's also managed to beat Kevin Lee, he beat Sanchez and Jorge Masvidal as well. So he's got some decent scalps under his belt. He's well-rounded enough to work on his feet, and he can throw an absolute assortment of punches, kicks, everything. The volume that he throws them at really makes him a handful to deal with on his feet. So he's not somebody who you feel like, oh, okay, there's a chink in his armor, I can take advantage of that. He's pretty good at everything, but he's not managed to combine all that together to go on a hell of a run and tear through the division. In terms of his next fight, I'd really like to see him go against somebody like Poirier, but I think he might be ranked a little too high for him right now. Maybe Felder. Maybe he could take on Paul Felder. That'd be a good fight. Paul Felder does want to come out of retirement for that, like he said. He's only going to go into another fight again if it makes sense and it's worthwhile. Either way, I'd like to see Al Iaquinta get some really big names under his belt. He's a top class fighter, but yeah, he needs to do something quick or he risks falling into obscurity. Right, now number 8 has just managed to pulverize his way into these rankings in the last couple of days, and that was because he managed to tap out Kevin Lee, and that was at the last UFC event that we're probably going to have for some time now, the UFC Brasilia event, behind closed doors, no audience there obviously. In terms of being a grappler, we mentioned Al Iaquinta as a top grappler. Charles Oliveira is another level. He's a 3rd degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and it shows. The majority of his fights, his wins, come from submissions and from completely dominating on the ground, and he can choke out anybody from any sport. He's always had that. He's always had that ability to be near unstoppable on the ground. Where he tends to struggle was when he was stood on his feet. He's on a 7-fight win streak right now, which I know there's a couple of fighters towards the top of these rankings who are on some pretty decent streaks of their own, but he is one of the hottest properties really in the lightweight division right now. And that's because he's managed to integrate now a top-class striking game into his arsenal. But he put away Nick Lentz with a hell of a strike the other month. At 30 years old, he's still got a lot of fighting left to do, and the amount of experience that he's garnered over his 10 years of just being in the UFC, it makes him one of the more difficult opponents you're ever going to come up against in that lightweight division. Who's next for him, I hear you ask? Well, he's had a lot of fights, obviously, throughout his career. He's fought the likes of Cerrone, he's fought the likes of Felder already. Maybe a rematch for one of those to try and climb his way up the rankings, or maybe, and I'd love to see this because I think it'd be a great test of his newfound striking prowess, is a fight against Justin Gaethje. I think that'd be absolutely stellar. I know I'd love to see that. Who would you like to see Charles Oliveira take on next? Number 7, next up is our Irish dragon himself, Paul Felder, 34 years of age. If you saw him last time out, he took on Dan Hooker at UFC Auckland, and his face looked like he'd been smashed by a shovel. Dan Hooker didn't come out of it looking too well either, and the two of them had a brilliant picture when they were sat in hospital, and yeah, they looked like they'd been in a car crash, which they pretty much have been. Paul Felder, in terms of him as a fighter, he's one of the... You'll never see somebody throw a better elbow, in my opinion. He uses his elbows in the most efficient and effective way out of anybody in the entire UFC, and I've said that a couple of times, but that's what I mean about this lightweight division. But Felder, after he lost that fight to Dan Hooker recently, he mentioned how he didn't feel as though he wanted to carry on, which... It is what it is. You've got to come to the end at some point. He's got family, he's got kids. But then he subsequently mentioned in an interview, I believe it was Ariel Helwani, that he fancied he would come back. He would come back for a fight, but it had to be the right fight. Who is the right fighter, here you say? Well, for me, I'd like to see him against maybe a Cowboy, somebody like that. I know I've mentioned him a couple of times, but Cowboy's the gatekeeper of this division in my eyes. He's the winningest fighter in all of UFC, like we'll get into later. It's a tough one. Not sure what's next for Paul Felder, but he's one of the veterans really of that division at this point. He's had a hell of a career, and just yeah, if you want to see some of the most vicious elbow strikes you'll ever see in your life, just check some of his highlights. The guy's insane. And we've made it to number 6, and it's a dude we've pretty much talked about an awful lot in this video already. It's Donald Cowboy Cerrone. Donald Cowboy Cerrone is one of the legends, really, the living legends of all of UFC. At this point, what more does he need to do? But after he lost to Conor, we're going to get into that, but he lost against Conor at UFC 246. It didn't appear like he was saying he was done. I think he's going to get back on the horse, but intended as a cowboy, sorry. But in terms of breaking down who he is as a fighter, he's, like I said, he can do it all. He's one of the best grapplers in that division on his day. If he gets you on the ground, he can snap your arm in an armbar, he can put you in a hell of a choke. He's really, technically he gets a bit of credit, but he needs a bit more credit for how technically sound he is on the ground. The way he creates distance, the way he stabs at his opponents, stabs them with front kicks, stabs them with jabs, to create that distance so he can let fly one of those head kicks. Just look at the amount of head kick finishes that guy's had. It's ridiculous. But yeah, when he lost to Conor early on, obviously in his last fight, it just looked like his head had gone as he was entering the octagon, which isn't great, but he is still the winningest fighter in all of UFC history. But Donald Cowboy Cerrone, what's next for him, I hear you ask? I'm not too sure. I think anybody below him would be happy to fight him. Personally, I'd like to see I wouldn't mind to see Charles Oliveira and Cerrone throw it back one more time. Right, so we've made it to number 5. Dan Hooker is our number 5. He's on a bit of a roll right now. He's won his last 3. He beat Ali Quinter, he beat James Vick, and I believe he obviously beat Paul Felder. He beat him by split decision. Very, very close fight. But now he seems to have the world at his feet. What is next for Dan Hooker? Well, I think he could do whatever he wants, really. I think he had a conversation, I believe it was the last couple of days, he had a conversation with Dustin Poirier on Twitter saying that fight's pretty much set. Obviously, global events right now, there's no way that fight's going to happen anytime soon, but that fight is set, and hopefully that fight will happen in the future. Started to really establish himself with a few more wins over these top 10 talents, and I think if he beats somebody like Poirier, who's ranked, I will tell you what he's ranked, we'll get there later, he's ranked higher than this, he's ranked higher than Dan Hooker, then he'll climb himself up those rankings, and I think he deserves it. He's a guy who's got a lot of tools in his game. He's a brilliant striker, really outstanding submission game. He gets you on the ground, it can be lights out pretty quickly. He's got a decent reach, and he uses it really well in most of his fights. So Hooker's an exciting prospect. Again, he's 30 years old, so he's in the prime of his career. And yeah, he's got a few hidden tools as well. He's got a beautiful knee that he can throw. And I'd like to see him face anybody right now in that top 5 division. I think he's a very exciting prospect. He's some new blood in that top half of the division as well. Right, so we've got to number 4 now. We've got to the highlight himself, Justin Gaethje. He's 31 years old. He's got pretty much most of the momentum available in the lightweight division is behind Gaethje. He's the real the workman, the real die-hard fan favourite at this point. He reminds me of your Romero in the fact that he just doesn't use his wrestling game because he just doesn't want it, which is insane. It's like a really nice tool that he's got in his back pocket that he can pull out at any point and pretty much dominate anybody in terms of takedown, slamming, you name it. But what he really tends to enjoy doing is just beating the crap out of people, really, with his fists, and he's pretty good at it. Really, in terms of straight up stand-up knockout power, there's not many people in that division who pack the same level of punch as Gaethje. But in terms of his next fight, a lot of people are going to lean towards that Conor fight because it'd just be incredible. It'd be a stand-up war. It'd be everything you want it to be. It'll be two people who are absolute specialists at standing up, throwing bombs, and something's got to give. It's that kind of fight. A lot of people think that he does deserve the title shot after Khabib Tony, which I'd make an absolute case for that. But in the time being, if he doesn't get that Conor fight, then maybe a fight against Poirier. But again, Poirier looks like he's going to be up against Hooker. It's tough for Gaethje. He's number 4 right now, and he's in a weird spot, let's be honest. Right, now we've made it to number 3. He's probably the man you've all been waiting for, really? Well, it depends who you are. But the notorious Conor McGregor is a champ. He was a former featherweight and lightweight champ at the same time. The guy's one of the best, really, to ever do it. I know that's not a popular opinion because a lot of people just think he's a superstar, celebrity fighter, and he just comes in for the money. He makes a lot of money because he can talk a good game, but the fact is he got into that position in the first place because he beat the hell out of a lot of people. He's got some serious scars. He's beaten the likes of Chad Mendes, he's beaten Max Holloway, he's beaten Dustin Poirier, he's beaten Eddie Alvarez, Jose Aldo. Look at those fighters. That's a guy, that's not just a celebrity fighter, that's a world-class fighter, but you probably knew this already. The question is, what is next for Conor McGregor? Well, according to Dana White, it's going to be a Khabib fight at some point in the future. We don't know what's going to happen with the scheduling now, obviously with the current state of things. But that fight's looking ever closer. A lot of people, myself included, would love to see a Gaethje fight. Give me the Gaethje, give me the Conor Gaethje fight. But equally, there's another guy who could slip straight into that spot, and his name is Nate Diaz. Who would want to see the Nate Diaz-Conor saga stretch to its 3rd fight and have that massive blow-off? Either one of those would make sense for this middle period in between taking on Khabib or Tony again. I keep just defaulting to Khabib when Tony has every chance of winning that fight as well. So yeah, it's, I don't know. Not many of us do at this point what's going to happen next for Conor. But if I had to put my money on it, I'd say Gaethje. I think the Gaethje fight's probably going to happen next for Conor. Right, we've made it to number 2, and number 2 is Dustin Poirier. We mentioned him a couple of times throughout this video. We're going to mention a lot of fighters. Like, we're going to do this. We're going to mix and match a lot of fighters throughout this top 10 breaking down the rankings. But yeah, Dustin Poirier's again, a tough dude. Very hard to put away. One of the best submission specialists, really, in the lightweight division right now. He can, as soon as he gets you on the ground, he's got some serious power. He's built like an absolute beast, really. When he gets you on the ground, his chokes tend to choke the life out of most. But he's also got some heavy hands. He's got outstanding timing with his shots, and he's proven that time and time again. He reminds me of Conor in the sense that he doesn't throw necessarily the most powerful shot. Not a Gaethje who just packs raw power. But it's the way he times his shots. He always catches somebody on a counter, always catches somebody when they least suspect it. He lost last time out to Khabib, which, again, no shame in that. A lot of people lose to Khabib. Khabib's very good all-round UFC fighter, MMA fighter, probably one of the best ever. But Poirier's still got a lot of options coming out of that fight. Like I mentioned, he's been on Twitter and matchmaking with Dan Hooker. That'd be an outstanding fight. If that went to the ground, that would be on it. I'm just starting to break this down in my mind a little bit. On their feet and on the ground, that would just be the most even clash imaginable, and I just want to see it now more than anything. Right, we made it to the number 1 contender in the UFC lightweight division right now. The number 1 contender is Tony Ferguson. He's the absolute boogeyman of that division. Nobody wants to fight him. Why would you want it? The guy's got some hands that look like he's just had a transplant and put some clubs, some big boulders on the end of his hands. And yeah, because they're that big, as soon as he gets you on the ground and starts gripping and starts grabbing your wrists and locking in these terrifying grips, you pretty much have to pray that you're going to get out of it alive. But Tony's also an exceptional striker. He's got outstanding boxing, outstanding Muay Thai ability as well. He's a 3-time All-American in wrestling, and he's a black belt in 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu under Eddie Bravo. So in terms of credentials, the guy's got a lot. The guy's pretty darn good at everything. There's not many things that Tony Ferguson can't do, and the fact is his tank as well, his engine is relentless. He just keeps going forward. He's terrifying. He's the boogeyman. He's the absolute boogeyman. And I think in terms of this fight with Khabib, there's nobody in that division right now who comes closer to Khabib in terms of being good enough to stop him than Tony. Nobody could do it. Khabib's got a hell of a chin. He's made of granite pretty much, and Tony seems to be built from the same stuff, but he's one of the most unorthodox fighters out there as well. But with that level of unorthodox ability comes unpredictability, and that's where Tony will be in his element. If he can catch Khabib with something that he wasn't planning, he could be set to become maybe the lightweight champion if we eventually get that fight at some point. But fingers crossed we do, and then after that, maybe if Tony gets out of that with a victory, he goes up against Conor, and that would be a fight I'd definitely want to see, if only to probably see Conor get completely mangled by the boogeyman. Okay, now we finally made it to the very end of this list, this rankings, this breaking down the rankings. We obviously made it to the champion. The champion is Khabib Nurmagomedov. He's pretty much built to be a mauler, and he is. He's just the most terrifying mauler you'll ever see in your life. Once he wraps his arms around you, gets you pushed up against the cage, it's quite uncomfortable to watch. He zaps the life out of people. He pushes his entire body weight down onto his opponent and makes them carry him, and just squeezes and grinds every last ounce of air out of your system. And then just when that's done, then he'll just lock in a submission or he'll knock you out. It's one of those, he drains you down to your last ounce of life force and then just pulverizes you. The fact is, he's 28-0 in his MMA career. He's beaten the likes of Ali Quinta, he's beaten Dustin Poirier, beaten Conor. In my opinion, this might be an unpopular opinion, he needs a few standout names, a few more standout names on that record. He's obviously 28-0, that's near impossible to do. Nobody does that. But in terms of having a legacy that people sit back in a couple of years' time and go, wow, that guy was something else. That was a once-in-a-lifetime athlete. He needs people like Tony. He needs people like Gaethje. He needs to get as many of these top 5 level athletes on his resume as possible. It really is tough to score, but I think Khabib will have enough to beat Tony. I think he comes out of that fight. I think he beats Conor again if they have a fight. And then I think he probably beats Justin Gaethje. So, in my personal opinion, I can't see Khabib ever losing, and I think he will retire undefeated. Those are famous last words, as he'll probably get knocked out now by Tony Ferguson, but that's I'm sticking to it. So that's been our top 10 lightweight, breaking down the rankings. I hope it's been a bit of a distraction for whoever's been watching. I hope you've enjoyed it, because yeah, fight fans around the world right now, it's unprecedented times, and I just hope you're all staying as safe as possible. Keep your fingers crossed that we see Khabib Tony, because it can't get cancelled again. Come on, it can't get cancelled again. I don't want this. Come on, please, MMA gods. I've been Gareth from WhatCulture Combat. Don't forget to like, share, click on the subscribe button, and ring the bell while you're there. Hopefully we'll have a lot more new content dropping to you every other day. Check out the list that we've got, check out the reviews that we've had, and we will have again in the future, I promise. And yeah, in the meantime, again, look after yourselves, and I'm sure I'll see you soon.